My name is Juliana Palma. I'm extremely glad to have Professor Dalia Palombo here. I'm going to host her and give a floor for her to provide information about her experience at FGV. We are so proud to have you as a visiting professor at our school. Let me first introduce Professor Dalia Palombo. Professor Dalia Palombo is Assistant Professor of Human Rights Law at the Department of Public Law and Governance at Tilburg Law School. Before that, she was LSE postdoctoral fellow and also senior research fellow at Institute of Business Ethical at University of St. Gallen. She holds degrees on University of Milan, Harvard Law School, and Maastricht Law School. She was also research fellow at Max Planck Institute in Leipzig. All right, so thank you very much. We are so glad to have you here today, Professor.
Thank you so much for inviting me here.
Great, thank you. So first of all, I'd like to know a little bit better about your field of expertise. So what are you into on the academic? What do you like to research, please?
So first of all, thank you very much for your invitation. Thank you to FGV for this wonderful opportunity to teach here 1 week in Brazil. As you said, I'm an assistant professor of human rights law, so that's my main field of expertise, and I'm particularly interested on the intersect between human rights and business and human rights and environment. And so all the impact that business has on environment and what this impact and the impact that business have on human rights. I'm also very interested in researching how private law and corporate law can change to become more sustainable and inspired by human rights.
That's wonderful, lovely. So how about your current study? So what are you tackling right now on the field of academics?
So right now I'm actually finalizing a chapter for a book which is focusing on the COVID-19 crisis and the impact that it had on human rights and on how we can build back better, not only a better society after COVID, but also a better human rights system. This is what I'm doing right now.
That's wonderful. Talk a little bit better about your course at FGV. So you are a visiting professor at our program, Global Program, and you taught to us the course From Corporate Social Responsibility to Business and Human Rights, which is super, super interesting. And I heard that students loved your course. And would you like to say a little bit better about the construction of this course, the syllables, the primary goals, and so on?
Yeah, sure. So I designed this course thinking that it would be interesting for students, and you have very diverse and wonderful, really interesting students, so it's a pleasure to teach them. Thinking that I would have a diverse audience, and so I may have students that come from private practice that are interested in what could be the investment environment for corporations now and in the future with all these new sustainability and due diligence requirement and human rights requirement. But at the same time, I wanted to give a sense to students about what international law has to offer in this sense. And so the idea of the course is on 5 days, is that the first 2 days really focus on the problematic aspect of corporate law and why the corporate law is not fit as it is at the moment in several jurisdictions to address human rights and environmental concerns. And then the class in the middle, it's somehow a sandwich class linking corporate law and the area of corporate social responsibility, what we can see from the point of view of corporations, to international law and human rights, so business and human rights. And the following 2 classes are really analyzing what's the framework under human rights law and international law for business, and from my perspective, what are the current inabilities of the international legal system to tackle corporate accountability. And then the final class really reflect on the latest development on the mandatory human rights and environmental due diligence that we can see at the international level with a UN treaty negotiation that would include a big part of mandatory and environmental due diligence. at least at this moment is at the negotiation, but also development in several laws that we see, especially in Europe, on mandatory human rights and environmental due diligence, as well as a proposal for a new EU directive in this sense. So all these laws will have an impact on how business have to be regulated. I'll also want to say that it's, for me, a very special opportunity to teach here. As my research, I very much focus on the impact that business have on human rights, but inevitably you also understand that that impact is not the same all over the world, that there is a very big divide between global north and south. And this is the first opportunity I have to teach in a country below the equator. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to see the perspective that students have and to discuss these issues here. And so it has really been thought-provoking, and I'm really happy that I had this opportunity.
That's wonderful. And as you were saying before about the connection between human rights and corporate law, can you provide a little bit of more information about regulation on a domestic perspective? So, for example, a company that's embedded here on the Brazilian background and the Brazilian regulation. So, to actually make the most of the human rights inside the company, what should this company attend for? What's the primary issue on your perspective about bringing a better regulation for this company in a domestic perspective?
Well, I mean, currently there are the United Nations Guiding Principle on Business and Human Rights that provide precisely that guidance for states and corporations in terms of implementing human rights and environmental agenda. So, of course, there is, from the perspective of the state, the fact that the state should ensure the protection of human rights by enterprises. And so in this case, if it's a Brazilian company, it would be the Brazilian state. Then there are a lot of soft rules that explain what a company should do in order to be responsible. It is also very important to consider, I think, in this sense, the pivotal importance of Brazil. Being a country that, on the one hand, of course, want to attract investment, but also being a country that is so crucial, having the Amazon to protect the environment, right? This is the green lungs, one of the very few remaining of the earth, and so the place of Brazil is really pivotal in this sense. Mm-hmm. And I somehow wish that what we need from the perspective of the energy transition, right, and to tackle climate change will come from different states with different perspectives. Mm-hmm. And Brazil has to be a key player in this sense because of its geographical location and because of its key importance in South America. And so for me, it's really important to teach this topic here and also to get the feedback from colleagues like you and here and from students about this important issue. Mm-hmm. And how people perceive this here, because obviously the problem of academia is that sometimes we are a little bit in a bubble, thinking yes. about what we research on, and I'm very passionate about my topic, but it's important also to have that real life check in various environments. So this is really a privilege to be here.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So talking a little bit better about regulation as well. So basically we're talking that you need to improve regulation towards human rights, and to have this inside of the regulator's mind by the time they're going to issue regulations, they're going to enforce the law and so on. So in this perspective, taking the Brazilian case, of course I'm not super expert in the Brazilian case, but for instance, how can you implement this better regulation towards human rights? So first, do you think the state could be held accountable because the state neglected all these standards, international standards, extremely important for regulation? Or do you think we need to wait for a cultural shift because we're talking about the salt part?
Well, this is a very interesting question. And what I think is that we need both. So obviously the Inter-American Court of Human Rights is upholding all these standards and sometimes holds to account states that do not properly regulate their industries to tackle human rights and environmental abuses. So that's the, let's say, the accountability perspective from the accountability of states. Then there is an accountability of corporations that somehow is parallel to that, in the sense that states have this obligation to protect people from the impact of companies, and so that means that they should make sure that companies are accountable when they abuse these human rights or environmental laws. But that means that, of course, and that's what we tackled during the course, it's not only a matter of accountability. Law is very much about accountability and regulation, obviously, but it's a matter about changing the culture that we have in companies and also changing the culture of consumption that we have in society generally, thinking about a more sustainable future in which we cannot consume as much as we had during the past decades. I think that law, it's only a part of this conversation. So I am somehow trying to tackle in my research a problem that is obviously very significant with a limited instrument, which is the legal instrument. However, as much as law, it's only a part of the conversation, I think it's a very important one, because there is a difference between saying that it would be nice for corporations to do so and so, or it's legal and it's an obligation. And the fact that when we say that there is a law that prescribes corporation to follow human rights or to respect the environment, well, that changes also the perception we have in society, our cultural perception about what is right and wrong. So, of course, law on its own doesn't serve much if people do not implement these laws, if states do not implement these laws, and if corporations do not follow these laws. But if the law changes, I think this provides the right framework for society and a culture, for that cultural shift that is absolutely necessary.
Yes, absolutely. So I'd like to share experience here in Brazil. We have a tool, the name is Termo de Ajustamento de Conduta. A big name to say is a sort of contract, a contract between the state, namely prosecutors, and also the companies. So, for example, if they do not attend a regulation, they cannot reach a requirement, so they are in an unlawful situation on the field of environmental law, they can settle this compromise, and the company is going to take action in order to satisfy all the requirements. So it's just like a kind of negotiation on the standards and so on. So do you think that abroad, internationally, there is an agenda, a current agenda about negotiation of rules, about, for example, settlements, about contracts, to not have a very broad regulation, a state regulation, but specific regulations that's going to tackle precisely the problems and the company under a particular fashion?
Well, I'm not exactly sure how this kind of a framework works in Brazil. What I can say is that, of course, there are a lot of discussion on regulations at the international level, at the national level, and as I was saying before, at the European level. And the level of specificity of this regulation has to take into account corporate needs, right? And so, of course, corporations are present at the UN in international negotiations for a possible treaty on an accountability framework for corporations. They are present at the European Union, and they speak and they of course make their voice heard in terms of what they would need. And I think this is obviously a good thing, because we also need corporations to be involved in this process and not to feel outsiders, but to understand and also to understand their needs for this transition, sustainable transition to work. At the same time, it is also very important to not let outside of the conversation civil society, because it's often the case that laws are shaped by states and businesses, but then what I would define as the outsiders are left behind. And so I think that from, let's say, a governance approach, it's really important, because these laws will determine what's the future of the planet. It's really important that we're all involved in this and we're all engaged in this discussion. We don't just, don't pay attention about this. I think it's very encouraging that there is so much attention to climate change now, and it became a mainstream issue in civil society. I think it's important that business and human rights is becoming also a matter of concern. And I think it's very important for states and the international community to listen to both business and society, and to find really a solution that works for people and planet and business, but not only for business.
That's so important. That's so important. I have to say that the missing stakeholder debate is also something so compelling here in Brazil. So thank you for bringing this up. One more question about our community. So you have this extremely vibrant community, and you had the opportunity to interact with our community. So would you like to share a little bit more about how was your experience here at FGV, at classes, with our scholars and professors and so on?
So my experience was really wonderful. I am amazed by the fact that despite this being a short period of time, it's 1 week of teaching, I was able to meet you and several other scholars, and I had a number of very insightful discussions, some of which also made me change a little bit the chapter on which I work, which means that it already had an impact, and I really do hope that we can keep in touch with the university and with the scholars I met, because that would be very important. So it was not only interesting from the teaching perspective, it was interesting also from the academic perspective and the academic exchange perspective. Also, I would like to thank all the organization at FGV, because it's really been wonderful and I didn't have to worry about anything, which is always a challenge when you travel to another continent. So it's been really a wonderful experience, and thank you so much for this.
No, you're welcome. So the final question is just a curiosity. So why Brazil? Why did you like to come to Brazil?
Okay, this is, I have two answers. One that is really honest, and the other one that is more professional. So the honest one is that it was my dream to visit the Amazon and to visit really this wonderful country for a long time, and this was just a fantastic opportunity. So that's the question, the answer coming from the heart. But the professional and also true answer is that, as I said before, I'm studying how globalization impact human rights across the globe. I'm organizing now with, for instance, the Netherlands Network of Human Rights Research at Tilburg University, a symposium on colonization in business and human rights. And the topic of the global north and global south, and how it has the impact globalization have on these different areas of the world, and the impact that corporations have on these different areas of the world, is really central to my research. So to me, the opportunity to have this academic and teaching experience in, as I said, a country below the equator, and as I said before, a country that is so crucial to this whole discussion, like Brazil, it's really an important experience. And I thought more than once about going for such an experience and teaching in a country in the global south. But yes, this came as a perfect opportunity somehow, and something I wanted to do for a long time. So combine a desire, a personal desire to see this wonderful country, with also a professional desire to have this kind of exchange that we're having now.
That's lovely. So we are so glad to have you here today. We are so proud to have you as a visiting professor. You really aggregated this community, and of course you're always welcome to come anytime you want to. So thank you very much for your time, for the information, for sharing so much knowledge, and to provoke me so much. I want to talk 2 hours more with you. Thank you very much. So thank you.
Thank you.